Why do you think ducks have webbed feet? Or beavers have teeth that never stop growing? These are adaptations that help an organism survive in its environment. Today, we're going to talk about adaptations. So, when we look at the fossil record that goes back millions of years, it records all the life on Earth that was preserved by the fossils that exist, whether dug up or still in the ground. So, there isn't a fossil of everything that has existed on Earth, and some of them I'm sure we'll find later on in human history. So thousands of generations can be studied by looking at the fossil records of different species. And from these records, biologists can study the morphology or what the physical appearance is of different organisms and how adaptations have helped those organisms develop into a different species. So, some changes to individuals in a species are slight and subtle and occur slowly over the Earth's history. This is called gradualism. So, a progressive change in one trait can eventually result in two different species. So, this would be if one bird species here we can see developed to be slightly smaller because of that was an advantageous in one of their populations. And over time, that species got smaller and stayed smaller. If we look at the beak shape, it also is like slightly thinner in that image. So we might now consider these two different species because they don't interbreed. And that would occur slowly over time. Changes in populations can also happen suddenly. If a major event has a strong impact on the environment, and this causes a different morphology of a species to be more advantageous. Change can occur quite rapidly within one or two generations, and this is called punctuated equilibrium. So this would be a quick change in a population followed by long periods of little change. So, changes in the physical characteristics of organisms result from changes in their genetic code. So, these subtle genetic changes account for variation within a species. So, this could be things like in humans, hair color, eye color, hair texture, and skin color. And in snails, given their environment, certain banded color patterns are going to be advantageous as they will provide camouflage and be less likely to be eaten by predators. But depending on their location, different patterns are advantageous in different locations, which gives them a lot of different variety because they live in a lot of different environments. Over centuries, the Galapagos Island finches have changed drastically based on the environmental availability of food on different islands, and now they look strikingly different from their common ancestral species. So, major changes in genetics lead to the development of a whole new species. So, over time, once these populations are isolated from each other and they start to evolve in different ways, now they're no longer going to be able to breed with each other because of changes in their genetics. So, when we're looking at inheritance, the basic unit for inheritance is your gene. Now, this is instructions encoded along the DNA molecule. And every cell has two sets of genes, one from each parent, the father and the mother. And so this results in offspring that are even genetically unique from their parents. The new organism is going to have a distinctive combination of traits resulting from the mingling of their parents' genes, and every offspring often will have a different combination from previous offspring because of the laws of cell division and independent assortment. So this gives a lot of variety into populations that use sexual reproduction as their reproduction of choice. So when changes in one organism can spread throughout the whole population if this trait is inheritable, so it is a genetic trait. And even slight mutations in the DNA can cause traits to vary. So this is going to be the color of beetles or the length of goose feathers or the color pattern on different fish. And all of this is variation. So it's a slight difference in the genes or traits among individuals within a population. So if we look at, say, all the jackfish in Lesser Slave Lake, there's going to be some slight color variation, and some of them it's going to be more advantageous in certain years, and other color patterns are going to be advantageous in different years. So if we look at the beetles in this image. We have the variation of a whole bunch of different colors of beetles, different green shades of green and brown, but the green beetles are more likely to be eaten because they're not as able to easily camouflage on that tree. But that variation is important because if the beetles were on a deciduous tree in the leaves or in a coniferous tree, then the green beetles would be able to camouflage as well. So mutations are a change in the order of the genes along a strand of DNA. So this can happen by misplacing ones. We replaced one nucleotide with another. We added or deleted one in, so that whole DNA chain kind of shifts left or right. Or we alter a gene during the process, and the parent's body didn't realize this occurred, and so then that altered gene was passed on to the next generation through fertilization. This could also be caused to mutations. So it can occur randomly or it can occur due to mutations. So like exposure to X-rays or solar ultraviolet radiation or different chemicals that can be found in plastics and fertilizers. So it's important to be aware of what type of chemicals you're coming in contact with. This is why they give you lead vests when you have an X-ray at the dentist, and they only want to X-ray your body if absolutely necessary. So mutations can cause some serious deformities. And so there's often some negative connotation with the term mutation. So we see like this little sheep that has 5 legs or this 2-headed fish. And we do see some of this when it comes to mutations in water bodies that have been heavily polluted by industry. But mutations can also be beneficial because it can result in the development of a characteristic that helps an organism survive. So humans develop the mutation to be able to digest lactose, and this is an advantageous mutation for humans because it provided us with another food source. So if a mutation is advantageous and it increases the chance of an organism to survive, it means they're more likely to reproduce, and as a result, the new trait spreads through the populations. So this mutation causing a selective adaptation is more likely to get passed on to future generations. Now, adaptations occur due to both mutations and naturally occurring variation in a species. And any structural behavioral trait that improves the organism's chance of survival is an adaptation. So many birds migrate seasonally to live in a more suitable environment every season. And so this would be a behavioral adaptation. And a structural adaptation is giraffes that have longer necks are going to be able to eat leaves from taller trees and have less competition for food. So depending on whatever environment you're in, there's different positive adaptations. So like webbed feet are an adaptation in water dogs versus big hairy feet in dogs that live in cold climates like huskies. So if we look at a adaptation question from your textbook, a forest floor habitat shows that an area has very little light and a heavy layer of leaf litter. This makes the environment dark and textural. The grassland area shows more open environment where the sunlight reaches the ground, leaving shadows from the tall grasses and vegetation. Which snail would have a better chance of avoiding predators in each one, and why? So when we look at this, the unmatted snail is more likely to survive in the forest habitat because it is darker and shaded, leading it to kind of blend in with that surroundings of leaf litter. Where because the grassland is going to have an area of shadows from tall vegetation, the banded snail is going to be more likely to survive because it has areas of light and has areas of dark, replicating the shadows on the grass. So adaptations, again, can be naturally occurring or caused by mutagens. And if they're beneficial, they're more likely to get passed on to future generations. And if they're harmful, they're likely to be weeded out of a population because those animals will be less likely to survive to reproduce.